Hello, everyone. Today's story isn't just another ghost tale. This is about a house that waits for spring, a place that breathes when the snow melts, that whispers your name when you step too close. People say it's abandoned, but when the storm comes, the lights turn on, and someone always disappears. When winter finally loosened its grip and the snow began to melt into the soft, hungry soil, the old manor at Hollow Creek stood waiting like a thing alive. Its tall windows were fogged from the inside. Its wooden beams creaked with the strain of age, and its chimney coughed out the faintest trace of smoke, though no fire had burned there in years. The villagers said that the house remembered. They spoke in low voices at the inn, claiming it could hear footsteps from miles away, and that when the first thaw came, it woke again. The roof sagged, the ivy twisted tighter around the brick, and the air inside thickened with a damp, living warmth. No one had dared cross its gate since the spring flood that had taken the family within. But that spring, as rain lashed the moors and thunder rolled across the valley, the house stirred once more, waiting, as if it knew someone would come. The traveler arrived on a stormy evening when the road had turned to mud, and his horse was near collapse. He saw the manor's light before he saw its shape, a flicker behind the warped glass, soft and golden, like a promise of warmth. He dismounted, calling out into the wind, but no one answered. The gate hung open, swinging lazily as though pushed by an invisible hand. He stepped inside, leading his horse to the old oak post where it once tied before countless forgotten guests. The animal snorted, ears twitching back, refusing to move closer. The traveler whispered soothingly, though even his own voice felt wrong, swallowed by the heavy silence around him. He left the horse and approached the door, the brass handle icy under his palm, and with a hesitant push, it opened before him. The scent hit first, not decay, not dust, but something sweeter, faintly floral, like wild lilies blooming after rain. The air inside was thick and warm, though no fire burned in the hearth. Candles stood half-melted along the mantel, their wicks dark, yet the faintest glow danced along the walls as though the light had no source at all. His boots echoed against the wooden floorboards that bent under his weight. Portraits hung crooked on the walls, faces smudged by time, their eyes following him with unnerving interest. On a nearby table sat a teacup filled halfway, still steaming faintly. He frowned, touching it, warm. Someone had been here not long ago. He called out once more, louder this time, but his voice seemed to vanish into the corners of the room like smoke drawn into cracks. He set down his bag and removed his coat, hanging it on the carved rack near the door. Rain pattered faintly outside, a steady rhythm that seemed almost musical. He found a chair by the window, brushing away a thin layer of dust before sitting. The manor sighed, a long, low groan from the beams above, as if acknowledging his presence. He thought of how strange it was, this house standing alone for years, yet still preserved, as though someone unseen tended to it. His eyes grew heavy from the warmth and the storm's lullaby beyond the glass. When lightning flashed, he thought he saw movement in the reflection, a faint shadow gliding behind him, pausing, then fading as quickly as it appeared. He turned sharply, heart pounding, but the room stood still. Only the pendulum of the old clock moved, ticking softly, though it had not ticked for decades. He rose and explored the rooms, candle in hand. The walls whispered faintly when he passed, the wind slipping through unseen cracks, shaping words that seemed almost clear. Upstairs, he found the remains of a nursery, a rocking horse, a tiny bed, a music box shaped like a bird. He wound the key out of curiosity. The tune that followed was slow and broken, like a memory half-remembered. As the melody played, the air grew colder. He felt a pressure behind him, a soft presence standing too close, and when he turned, his candle nearly went out. A single whisper brushed his ear, too quiet to understand, too human to ignore. The music box stopped by itself, the final note hanging in the silence like breath. He hurried downstairs, shaken, but unwilling to show fear to an empty house. The parlor seemed different now, the shadows deeper, the scent of lilies stronger. He poured himself tea from the pot on the table, surprised to find it still warm. His hands trembled slightly as he lifted the cup, and he noticed faint marks along the rim, as though someone else had already drunk from it. He placed it back slowly and stepped toward the window. Outside, the storm had softened, but mist now clung to the fields, thick and gray, swallowing the horizon. He could no longer see his horse by the gate. Only a faint shape stood there, tall, unmoving, watching. He backed away from the window, unease crawling beneath his skin. Somewhere above, a door creaked open, then another. Footsteps began to descend the staircase, slow, deliberate, heavy with water as though dripping from unseen boots. He stood frozen by the fireplace, the candle flickering wildly in his grip. The footsteps reached the last stair, then stopped. The silence that followed was worse than the sound itself, an expectant hush, as though the entire house were holding its breath. He forced himself to speak, his voice barely steady, asking if anyone was there. The answer came not in words, but in the faint hum of the walls. The same whispering he'd heard before, rising now, forming a low chorus of sighs. The candle went out. He dropped it, reaching blindly through the dark, his pulse thundering in his ears. The air was thick, pressing against him, filled with the scent of wet soil. His fingers brushed something soft, fabric, hanging loosely, swaying as if on an invisible body. Then the floorboards beneath him moaned, the house exhaling a deep, tired groan that seemed to shake its very bones. He stumbled toward the door, groping for the latch. When lightning flashed again, the reflection in the hall mirror caught his eye. Dozens of pale faces staring from behind him, their mouths open in silent welcome. He fled into the storm, rain blinding his vision, his boots sinking into the soaked ground. The horse was gone. The fields glistened as though the earth itself were breathing. Behind him, the manor's windows glowed once more. Faintly at first, then brighter, like a beacon pulsing with life. He ran until his lungs burned, until the light faded from view and only the night remained. The next morning, the villagers found his horse still tied by the gate, shivering but unharmed. The traveler was nowhere to be seen. Only the faint sound of dripping echoed from within the house. Steady, rhythmic, like water falling into a deep, hollow place. When they searched the garden, they found the soil freshly turned, dark and damp as though something had been buried in haste. The old ivy along the walls seemed thicker now, curling around the windows with greedy intent. The teacup on the table was full again, steam rising lazily in the still air, and if one stood quietly by the door and listened, truly listened, they could hear a heartbeat somewhere deep beneath the floorboards. The manor waited, patient as ever, for spring to come again. "What do you do to your center?"